quorum, so I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's 8:32. This is the State Board of Education, Wednesday, July 16th. And let's start, Maureen, with a roll call, please.
Okay. Tammy Colby.
Good morning, everyone.
Brian Campion. Tom Lovett.
Here.
Mohammed Job. Cynthia Stewart.
Here.
Caleb Greenwood.
Here.
Lyle Jepson.
Here.
Richard Werner. Secretary Saunders.
Here, good morning.
And Chair Samuelson.
Here, good morning. Are there any amendments to the agenda? I do have one. I just received an email from Katie Ballard, who is scheduled to provide the Special Education Advisory Panel update. And she said she's not feeling able to present this morning, so we're going to table that and push it to August. Maureen, would you just mind emailing her back and let her know that I received her email and that's completely fine?
Sure thing.
Thank you very much. Or Suzanne or someone. Thank you. Okay, any other amendments to the agenda? Great. Hearing none, are there any members of the public who wish to be heard? So you can raise the hand icon on the Teams platform, or if you're calling in, *5 to raise your hand. Kim, I see your hand. Let's see if there's anyone else. I think I just see Kim at the moment. So as always, we ask members of the public to limit their comments to about 2 minutes, and you are always welcome to submit any comments in writing to be included as a link to our minutes. So with that, Kim, the floor is yours. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Kim Gleason, Grand Isle. And I join you all this morning to raise continued concern regarding the lack of oversight of independent schools, and in this case, namely the Inspire School. This process has been underway with first suspension and then finally a prolonged review for certainly more than a year. It may be coming up on 2 years now. And as I recall, in my tenure on the State Board of Ed, they were under review in 2019 for financial matters as well. We have within our approval this requirement of 5 days to inform if there's change in status for a number of conditions, with apparently no teeth or repercussions should those not be done. And that is concerning. I also find myself perplexed by the fact that as far back in institutional memory as 2013 on the State Board of Ed, there has never been a revocation of an approval. And I am finding now that this may be delayed despite the Secretary's recommendation due to the Council of Independent Schools and their role in this process. That is deeply concerning. If in fact they are able to hold this hostage, then we might as well say that the Council of Independent Schools is responsible for oversight and renewal approval or otherwise. And that is akin to putting the fox in charge of the henhouse. I can't begin to imagine that that would have been legislative intent. The State Board of Ed, the AOE has a responsibility for oversight and recommendation to the State Board of Ed. The State Board of Ed has a responsibility for renewal and approval. And if this process is this broken, the State Board of Ed also has a statutory responsibility to report to the legislature on matters of concern related to their areas of oversight and their responsibility to help inform legislation that would remedy the situation. I implore you to do so. In these situations, we are finding ourselves exposing our most vulnerable students to lack of oversight and accountability at a tremendous expense to the tune of, on average, probably $100,000 per student for these therapeutic programs. That is a cost to our taxpayers without oversight. It is a risk to our students. It is unconscionable, and we have responsibility to do better. I am begging you, I continue to beg you, I'll keep showing up, that we do our job as a state in protecting our most vulnerable, and that we stop carving out therapeutic schools from statutory changes. Please
Thank you,
bring your
Kim.
attention to this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just, we don't respond to public comment. I know Kim knows that, but I also just want to say that we could not respond to this matter since this is something that may come before the board in our quasi-judicial capacity. So any comments would not be appropriate from the board.
Understood, Jennifer, but I think I was also pointing to, with all due respect, the statutory responsibility of the State Board of Ed to provide both oversight, but also inform legislation where there are problems with the system. So I implore you to take an active role in remedying situations like this.
Thank you.
We can't have that be the case. Thank you.
All right, I see Rama Schneider, your hand is raised.
Yeah, hi, good morning. I just want to clarify whether comments for the Central Vermont Supervisory Union Board issue will be taken when that agenda item is specifically addressed, or should I do that now?
We do have public comment. It's item J on the agenda that is specific to the request
Okay.
for Paine Mountain.
All right, thank
Yeah,
you.
if you
I'll
wanna
just
hold
wait
your
till
comments.
then.
And I think
I
you're
will.
on the list too.
Thank you.
Great.
Torrin
Thank you.
Ballard is here.
Okay. Any other members of the public? Not seeing anyone at the moment. We can leave this item open for a few minutes and I'll go ahead to our next agenda item, which is approval of our State Board of Education June 18th, 2025 meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is that Lyle? Is there a second?
Sorry, my mic was on. I'll second.
Tammy, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving our State Board of Education meeting minutes from June 18th, 2025, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, please raise your hand and signify by saying nay. Any abstentions?
I abstain.
I abstain. I wasn't present.
All right, thank you both. Motion carries. Okay, board announcements. I have a couple, but let me open the floor. Does anyone else have board announcements? All right, well, my first announcement is I spoke with the governor's office and they have appointed a new student member on Monday, so 2 days ago. Her name is Brianna Marsh. She's from Newbury and she goes to Oxbow High School. I have been in communication with her and it sounds like she's working today and was unable to shift her schedule at the last minute to join us today, but she is looking forward to joining us in August. So we will have new student member and I'll administer the affirmation of, I always forget this, oath of allegiance and affirmation of office at our August meeting. And then the second announcement is that I have been working with the Attorney General's office to put together an invitation to bid on a contract to serve as the board's attorney on retainer. As you all know, we got funding through Act 73 that would allow us to do that. So I imagine that the invitation to bid should go out shortly and hopefully we will have an attorney on board within the next month or so. But I'll keep you all updated. Any other board announcements? Right. I still don't see any members of the public with their hands raised. Check one more time. Okay. Well, I will keep this open through the student report, and Caleb, it's all you.
All right, it feels a little weird going first, but obviously not too much going on. It's summer. Just been working a lot, getting ready to go to DC next week. I'll be touring Georgetown and George Washington. We didn't really have time to tour American, but my cousin's best friend goes there. So, and also like, I think it's multiple of his friends, but also his best friend goes there. So I do have people I can talk to about that and like dig more in without necessarily going on a tour. But I'm excited to do that. I basically have my schedule for next year. So I'll be taking an AP in each subject and then language, and then that's basically my whole schedule. So I think it's basically going to be every other day, only have like one class. But I don't have too much more other than that.
So on the every other day that you only have one class, what are you doing with your other, with the rest of your school day?
So oddly enough, my credits, like I somehow didn't manage to have enough but like the credits that like aren't from a specific class. I'm blanking on the name. But like I need
Okay, go ahead.
yeah. So I need like credits for that. So I'm just gonna take like tech classes basically. Like Word, Office, like stuff like that. And then I'll have enough credits.
That's great. And then other than touring colleges, what are you doing this summer?
Not too much, honestly.
Enjoy it. Enjoy it while it lasts.
I mean, this weather's been so on and off, from super hot to random cold days.
Any comments or questions for Caleb? Well, Caleb, thank you. I hope you have a great trip to DC next week. And if you want any other information about American, let me know. Because my little daughter just graduated from there. All right, so we are going to table, well, actually, let me close off. Final call for members of the public for public comment. Not seeing anyone. Okay, well, we will circle back to this at the end of our meeting. So I started to say we were going to table the Special Education Advisory Panel update until August, which brings us to the Commission on the Future of Public Education in Vermont update. So a couple of updates on that front, and I included the meeting minutes in the agenda packet just so you guys can follow along, as well as a couple of materials that have been put together by the agency. So as you all know, Act 73 really whittled down the focus of the commission going forward. We still have a scheduled initial report due by October 1st. With at least 30 days for public comment, and then the final report is due December 1st. We did talk at the meeting. Representative Conlon said that that December 1st deadline could certainly be pushed if the commission needed extra time. And we discussed maybe pushing it out by a couple of weeks just since our charge has changed, but we're still looking at report due sometime in December and a sunset date of December 31st. The other thing is we still have a few counties in Vermont that by statute, the commission is supposed to have a public meeting in every county in Vermont. So I think those final meetings will get scheduled over the next few months just to make sure that we satisfy our charge in that area. And in light of the narrowed scope, the commission decided to pause the current contract that it has with Afton Partners, which was the consulting group to help us with the public communication aspect of the role. And so that is being put on hold pending further discussion of the future scope of the work. So the whittled down charge is the commission is now focused on recommending roles and responsibilities of district school boards, as well as the electorate recommending the process for maintaining community voice, and recommending the process for monitoring implementation of the law that will be transparent and public facing. So to that end, in the agenda packet is a document that was prepared by Emily Simmons at the Agency of Education that summarizes roles and responsibilities as they currently exist in law. And I would invite board members to review that. And if you have any thoughts about this new charge of the commission about what should the roles and responsibilities be going forward, considering the foundation formula and larger school districts, please review that sheet and email me with any comments that you have. The next commission meeting is on Monday, this coming Monday from 9 to 11. It's a virtual meeting. And I'd be happy to communicate any observations or comments that any of you might have. The final update is that the commission will be consulting with the school district redistricting task force on a process for public engagement to inform the task force decision-making process. So don't have any information on that. I just know that it's something that we will be working on in partnership with the school redistricting task force.
What's that?
So I will pause there if anyone has any comments or questions. Not hearing anything. So again, if you've got any feedback, just email me and let me know before Monday, please. So with that, Zoe, I will turn it over to you for the secretary's report.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Pleased to be with you today. For my secretary's update, I want to provide some information around some of the federal changes since our last board meeting, and also an update on the implementation of Act 73. When we met in June, I shared an update around our process for requesting waivers for the ESSER grant. So as point of context, what we discussed in June was that the state of Vermont had pursued a late liquidation request in order to gain approval to utilize remaining ESSER funds to support with the COVID relief. Those funds had previously been approved under the Biden administration, and under the Trump administration, through their discretion, had really canceled or rescinded that approval for states and districts and implemented a waiver request process. At the meeting in June, I had shared our efforts to submit a number of waivers, and we were at that time pending response on a large majority of those requests and had received one approval and one denial. After our meeting last month on June 26th, we did receive a Dear Colleague letter from the Secretary of Education, Secretary McMahon, that did restore funding for those programs based on the guidance that was given before March 28th. So this is very much an encouraging development, and that represents about $11 million of projects for both at the state and the district level to pursue. These are projects that have already been approved and were underway. They represent projects related to funding after school programs, teacher training, construction projects that support safety and wellness. The reason that these funds were restored, as was described in the letter, was an issue of fairness. So during this time, there was a lawsuit and the plaintiffs had gained access to these funds. And so there certainly was an equity issue with those states that did not join the lawsuit in not being able to access these funds. So that has been restored. There's continued work that we're doing with the field in our weekly office hours to provide support in ensuring there's clarity around those expenses that are allowable. And we are continuing to work really closely with U.S.A. and also with our congressional delegation. I do want to thank publicly Senator Saunders and his team. They were very instrumental in working with us in Vermont and even working specifically with our districts through the process of submitting a waiver and helping to get these funds restored. We are continuing to follow the situation and make sure that we are moving forward and providing all of the necessary documentation that is required to be able to draw down these funds. So I'll pause there to see if there's any questions.
Tammy?
Tim?
Good morning, Secretary. I know that you have requested a waiver for the funds that were embargoed. My question though is, does the state have any intention of requesting a broader waiver for the ESSA requirements, particularly as it relates to the Title I-A dollars and the increased flexibility that is likely to come down the pipe now for under the new budget bill?
Yeah, so separate updates. So the first update is really, so I'll get to your next point regarding the withholding of funds. So the first point is around the ESSER funds that were rescinded and now have been restored. And so this is an encouraging development, but we're continuing to really engage very closely with our districts to ensure that there's access to those funds. There are some caveats that are built in to that restoration of funding. And so as everything, it's not as simple as it sounds. There are certain requirements that we need to make sure in terms of timing of when projects were approved in order for districts in the state to access those funds. So that's why I share that this is very encouraging news, but we are there are some nuances that we're managing around to ensure access. The second update is less encouraging, which is related to the withholding of certain title funds and also funds to support adult education programs. I will share, I think Susanna Marina, if they have not already, will provide a written document that will connect you with some additional resources and background. This withholding of funds represents $26 million for the state of Vermont. These are funds that were approved by Congress and signed into law by the president. They are dollars that support our most vulnerable students, specifically the programs that funding is being withheld. It was Title I Part A, which really supports students to meet academic needs and providing additional support for interventionist curriculum materials. Title I Part C supports our migrant students. Title II Part A is used for mentoring and professional development. This is a very sizable portion of the funds that are being withheld. Title III supports our English language learners, and Title IV Part A, it promotes safe and healthy schools and overall wellness initiatives. Title IV Part B is funding that supports 21st century after school and summer program. And McKinney-Vento supports programming for our homeless students, and the adult education basic grants support our adult learners in promoting literacy and workforce readiness. So these are the particular programs where funding has been withheld. We, as I had mentioned at the last meeting, had started to grow concerned that these funds may not become available. And the reason for that is that our initial allocations had been significantly delayed. And so we were actually one of the first states to get ahead of this in terms of providing guidance to our districts. I really want to commend our federal programs team and finance team for being proactive in that. So we had already submitted some guidance to the field to budget based on their carryover. So dollars that may have been remaining from the prior year. We do engage in a consolidated grant program, which is best practice so that we can really rely on braided funds. But when not all of those funds are available, it creates delays in our ability as a state to approve. And so we were really proactive in coming out even before we received this announcement on June 3rd that they would be withheld to give guidance to the districts around how to complete their grant applications to get substantial approval from the agency so that they could access those funds that are available as early as July 1 at the beginning of the grant period of performance. So I am very proud of our team for being proactive, but obviously this is a big concern for us as a state. Typically, it's customary that these dollars are released on July 1 and that we get our grant award notice. On June 30th, we did receive notification that the funds within these particular programs would be withheld. The communication indicated that the administration is reviewing these programs against their priorities. Given that these dollars have already been approved, that creates an incredible challenge in terms of just simple fairness and being able to give our schools the dollars that they are entitled to. In response to that, I was proud to support the Attorney General's office in joining a multi-state lawsuit to challenge the freezing of these funds, and in our role at the agency, really being able to document the impact. So I submitted a declaration that outlined the specific impacts of these dollars being withheld on our districts, which was included in the lawsuit that was filed on Monday. So I think that's some of what Tammy is indicating in terms of these particular funds. I will also be providing an update to the Joint Fiscal Committee later this month on the impact of the withholding of these federal funds.
I actually asked a different question. So I was asking about whether or not it's your intent, the agency's intent, to pursue a waiver for Title 1A dollars, similar to what Oklahoma and Iowa have done, to get additional flexibility under VS.A to implement new priorities and programs.
We have not made a decision on that.
Is that being contemplated?
So as I think you've kind of alluded to this in multiple meetings, the work that we're doing right now is making sure that we can get all of our districts the dollars that they need and continue to provide the oversight so that students are benefiting from these resources. There are many opportunities that states are pursuing in terms of flexibility of using these funds. So I think that's something that's a question that many states are exploring.
Rich.
Thank you. I'm sorry I was late. We just had an SU super board meeting or executive committee meeting. So they just reviewed with us the lack of funds. So in our SU, and because all the special ed flows through the SU, we just looked at like little under $1 million worth of funding that we had planned on, and we always know it's an estimate. So I mean, I think it's going to be a huge issue, and I really appreciate anything that anybody can do for that. But we also decided that we can't figure it's all about, the sky is falling like Chicken Little. We'd gotten a grant from from somewhere for an electric school bus. And then we couldn't get an answer on it. And for like 6 weeks, and everybody was like, the sky was falling. Then all of a sudden, the money appeared in our account. So I think it's still kind of fluid, isn't it, from my understanding? Yeah. So.
I think the challenge is that this is creating a tremendous amount of uncertainty and instability within our system. So just last month, we were talking about the impact of the ESSER funds that we weren't able to access. This month, we're talking about now being able to, pursue drawing down those funds. So the level of uncertainty is really challenging. What we've been doing with our districts is communicating what we know and being proactive and providing guidance around how they can strategically budget. So in some cases, there are funds that are carryover funds that they can be able to utilize to fund certain programs as we are in this period of uncertainty.
So,
And
Zoe,
Rich,
can I
if
just?
Could I add something there? Rich,
Yeah,
I think the important thing to know, right, is that the title funds, your Title II and Title III dollars that they've held back, the decision on whether or not those funds will be released is not going to come from the U.S. Department of Education. It's going to come from the Office of Management and Budget. And that is a fundamental shift that's never occurred before. And so I think so for those things, such as your electric bus, the US Department of Education still is approving those kinds of reimbursements. However, the title funds have been shifted over to the Office of Management and Budget and are being approved by a different secretary and right. And so I think you have to sort of keep your eye on that ball too. And so I think it puts the title funds. And so that's a very different game of play. And that was a very highly political move to do that, right? And was done for some very strategic reasons, which I think puts the title funds at a different kind of risk for districts. And to Secretary Saunders' point, right? I think the title funds require a different level of strategic planning for districts than some of these other kinds of smaller grant dollars. And the other thing I would point out, Rich, that I mentioned special education. None of the special education dollars fall under any of sort of these machinations that are going on right now, right? The federal IDA dollars have not been touched as a part of any of this yet. So.
Because there's a couple, and Tammy, I didn't want to lose it if I could, Zoe, because I get really distracted by bright, shiny objects. So anyways, because we were talking about carryover funds, and, we had carried over quite a bit of ESSER money in our SU, and we had a plan, we had ramped it out for like 5 or 6 years because we'd seen a lot of other districts, like one just to the north of us, spend all their money almost instantly, and then they were really in a bind. And then I guess they changed the carryover. Like you can only carry over 10% of one fund, but the other ones you could carry over more. And then I think somebody new came in to your department last year and they changed the other carryover funds. Is that something that gets brought down from high above, or is that something that's done in your office? And is that something we can look at? Because one of the things I always say too is, if I could predict what's going to happen a year out, a year and a half out, I wouldn't be here. I'd be on a tropical island because I'd have played the futures market and made billions and trillions. But, because we always make a guess. And I tell a story like 25 years ago when I first got on the school board, we had a student move out of town like the middle of August. And our special ed saved in that fund because it was district at that time, school district. It was like $100,000 that we had put away. We had budgeted for that student for the program they were going to be in. But the town south of us all of a sudden had the student, and, they're like, they didn't budget for it. So, I mean, I have always complimented our staff when they don't spend it just because it's there. Can we look into the carryover funds and changing how that works? And not today right now, but could we maybe talk about that at the next meeting so you have more time to prepare? Because I don't want to just throw this at you now and have you try to give an answer.
Certainly. So I want to unpack just a couple of things there. So one related to the ESSER funds. There was a certain period of time where we were able to extend those. Those were the dollars that we are describing as approved through late liquidation under the Biden administration, that then under the Trump administration were rescinded and now are restored. Then there's a separate conversation, which is what is the best practice in terms of grants management of kind of setting aside a percentage of carryover in order to kind of prepare for some instability or rainy day, if you will. So I would be happy for us to bring forward our grant experts to kind of talk about the best practices in managing the grants and the different guidance, the guidance that we provide to support that. As we are in this current situation, we have provided guidance to the districts to budget based on available funds. And that means those available funds are inclusive of carryover funds within these specific title programs where money is being withheld. So there's a kind of a lot of complexity as we're talking through some of the scenarios you worked through, but I think there are kind of different aspects of the work. The other thing that's important to note is that within the agency, we have exercised all of our authority to allow for flexibility. So within these particular title programs that would have been withheld, there's allocations for what percentage of the funds you have to spend on certain components of the work. We have waived that so that given guidance to districts that with using, for example, their Title IV-A carryover funds remaining from last year, they now have flexibility to utilize those dollars wherever they're best served, and won't be held to the requirement previously around the percentage allocation across the buckets of work that are funded within that program. So we're in constant communication with the district, and we are exercising the authority we have to allow flexibility during this period of time to ensure that those dollars are being maximized in support of the district's major priorities. And then, as I mentioned, we are did join a lawsuit to pursue legal action to try to get our districts the dollars that have been approved and that they're entitled to.
Thank you. Thank you,
really
Tammy.
separate from any new bill, right? This is these are dollars that have already been approved.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it for both of you.
Well, and let me just say too, because I was reading about the funding freeze, and I think Vermont is second only to Washington, D.C., and only barely in terms of percent of state budget and the effect that this is having on our state, which is really frustrating, demoralizing, and the number of lawsuits that have been filed in the last several months is kind of dizzying. And I say this as a lawyer, it's never the right answer when the lawyers are the only ones who win. Like, that's not the right answer. And it's sad the amount of money that's going to fighting and defending lawsuits when what we're really looking at is the education of children and our most vulnerable populations. And to me, that's a really sad reality that this is where we are. And I just want to acknowledge Zoe, your efforts and the agency's efforts, because I think it's hard to always be reacting when I think what you want to be is proactive and not reactive. And this is just, every day it feels like there's something else that's getting in the way of, the work that you and that we are trying to do. And teachers and principals and superintendents, like, we're here because we care about educating our students. So it's exhausting, but thank you.
It's really creating a very the uncertainty is destabilizing to our system, and it's very, I think, frustrating and challenging at every level of our system to be able to plan effectively to ensure that students are getting the programming that they need during the summer, and also that our districts are able to hire and enter into contracts in the summer to provide services that are needed in the fall. And so I think one of the big points that I would make is, we're in a game of wait and see, right? The dollars are being withheld, but the delay in and of itself is creating a very negative impact because districts aren't able to move forward, as I said, with hiring critical staff, with executing contracts if they don't have the dollars available. So the delay itself really is a negative impact that is challenging and compromising the system's ability to be ready to support our students, and is having an immediate need even now during the summer, where we know that some districts are making adjustments to their summer programming. So this decision definitely has had an immediate and negative impact on our schools and our districts. I think there is rhetoric out there around these dollars, at least from the Trump administration, that these dollars are being used for purposes that are not, aligned to the country's educational priorities, right? And I will assure you that these dollars are being used to train teachers in the science of reading. These dollars are being used to educate our English learners and our migrant students, and to provide the academic support that's needed for students that are struggling. That's what these dollars are used for, and that's how we have been able to leverage these funds in the state of Vermont to support our students. So it is really challenging. And I think from the agency's perspective, we are really staying very current with the changes that are happening and being proactive and providing the guidance to the districts. And then in this case, supporting legal action and attesting to the impact of the withholding of these funds. Any other questions around the federal update? I'll continue to keep you updated. I will also share with you the, and if you haven't already received it in your inboxes, within my update, I do link to a memo that we provided to our congressional delegation. That memo provides additional detail around the historical context and the timeline of how we got to this point, and really how atypical this cycle was for us. And then we are able to enumerate a little further the actual fiscal impact. So you will see in that memo the fiscal impact by SU and SD for each of these programs. And also we have a narrative section that helps to expand on what types of changes and impacts this is having on our system already. So I do encourage you to look at that, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to follow up. The other update I wanted to provide, shifting gears a little bit to really the state, is the implementation of Act 73. So formerly known as H454, I'm now training myself to call it Act 73. And just want to highlight, as you know, there are a lot of deliverables that the agency is responsible for in the coming months, and wanted to give you an update on some of those most immediate project deadlines. The first major provision to go into effect is the new eligibility criteria for independent schools to receive public tuition dollars. And so there's really a two-part test for this eligibility. One is related to geography, and then the other is related to the percentage of students that school has historically served and received public tuition dollars. So what we are doing is a data validation and certification process. We have collected in the past enrollment data, but it has never been used for this purpose. And so given kind of the stakes and the need for this information to be accurate, we have engaged in a data validation process with our independent schools and our school districts, and have asked them to submit those responses by July 28th. So that is work that is underway. The effective date for this eligibility criteria coincided with the date that this was enacted into law. So that creates a little bit of challenge as you think about implementation. However, we were really proactive even before this was passed to start the wheels turning in getting this into motion to ensure that we could validate the eligibility. Just as a note for those that may have questions that are listening, those students that are already enrolled in an independent school or were accepted before July 1st will be eligible to continue their academic career at those schools, even if they don't meet the new eligibility criteria. Another deadline that we are working on is to address or to really report on the factors contributing to the extraordinary special education reimbursement costs. This is building on an analysis that we provided to the General Assembly at the end of the session, and really identifying what those cost drivers are, along with really making recommendations around quality as it relates to actual program cost of delivering special education statewide. So we are actively working on that. That's a very quick deadline when you think about September 1. So we're also engaging subject matter experts in the field to really work with us on reviewing the preliminary analysis we've already submitted and expanding upon that. I would expect that within that report we submit in September that we will outline some additional areas of inquiry that may need to be explored in order to more fully support the legislature next session with their decision making. I'll keep you updated on that and share the report when it's ready. Another major requirement is for the Agency of Education to make recommendations to you as a state board for graduation requirements. And then you'll have another year through the rulemaking process to support that. this is a really, I think, incredible opportunity for us to work collaboratively in thinking about how we set the standard of excellence for education in the state of Vermont. And so we are working right now to develop a community engagement process, and we're building a lot of the work that's already been done in the field in defining these graduation requirements. We are also looking at best practices nationally and thinking about how do we propose these recommendations in a way that's really going to help support and prepare our students for success in high school and beyond. And we are also looking at this holistically. So when you think about graduation requirements, we also need to be mindful of the entire K-12 system and thinking about readiness at every level. So this is really a massive project, and we're really engaged in it in a very deep and meaningful way, and look forward to sharing those recommendations with you as a state board and continuing to stay involved with you and with the field as you make those recommendations and go into rulemaking. Yes, Lyle.
I'm going to put my technical education hat on. In the past, there has been the option of embedded academic credits in programs, technical programs that provide for enhanced access for students from high schools to the tech center, so that they're not kind of squeezed out because of the academic credits. Is that being considered and discussed as you go through that process?
So, I mean, I think you bring up a really important consideration, and absolutely that needs to be part of the conversation. So as a state, we've talked about flexible pathways and really creating multiple opportunities through proficiency-based learning to demonstrate mastery. So that's all part of the conversation as we're thinking about the graduation requirements. And I think there's some really intentional conversations we need to have around kind of what are the minimum set of requirements, and then what are opportunities to be able to demonstrate your proficiency in multiple ways. I think what we're trying to do is to ensure that we have the right structure so that there is a consistent standard of excellence and rigor in Vermont, while I think acknowledging, as you're describing, that there may be multiple ways to demonstrate mastery in certain areas. So all of that's being considered. It's a very complex process, and would welcome your input with your experience in career and technical education as we're engaging in this work.
I think even the flexible pathway process, there's been some inconsistency potentially between districts and how they use that. Knowing just in my distant past with 7 or 8 different sending schools, it was more difficult for some schools to provide access to technical education based on their graduation requirements than others. So potentially the flexible pathway process, if that is consistently implemented, would be a way to help with that. But I'm sure you've already thought of that, so I'm just bringing it up. So
I would, as we go into this process, I would note that there is tremendous variability with graduation requirements currently across our SU and SDs. I think one very clear example is just the number of indicators that are required. So in some systems, it's 6, and in others, it's over 135 for graduation requirements. So that gives you a sense of what we're approaching in terms of the degree of variability with our graduation requirements. And as Lyle, you noted, even sending schools that send tuition students to the same tech center have a lot of different requirements and expectations. So these are all things that we need to consider, and I think are part of the reason why it's important for us as a state to move to statewide graduation requirements. It really is an issue of equity. It's an issue of access to educational opportunities. The other point I would make is, as you know, we completed our federal monitoring visit this last year. And one of the findings that they identified is that we do not have a consistent level of rigor as we're looking at graduation requirements and evaluating flexible pathways. So I think that just reinforces the importance of us engaging in this work and ensuring that we have that level of consistency, equity, and opportunity for students across the state.
It is
So
a
more
big
to come
job.
on it. More to
Huge
come on
job.
that. We're also involving a lot of different stakeholder groups and have started we will be rolling out more of a formal process of public engagement, but we've engaged in some preliminary work with teachers and superintendents. There's actually a cohort of doctoral students at UVM that are looking at this as a problem of practice for their semester work this year. It's really exciting. I mean, it's an opportunity, as I said, for us to really contemplate what is that standard of excellence as we're really evaluating student success in the state of Vermont. And there's a lot of work that's already been done in the field. So one of our first step is kind of doing an environmental scan and audit of what the existing requirements are and the level of similarities and differences. That's a starting point for us to engage in further input and involvement from the field. And I think there's a lot of enthusiasm around this because there's an opportunity for us really to come together as a state collectively and ensure that we're setting all of our students up for success. But it will come with a lot of changes too, and we've really got to map that out and what are those implications as we think about rollout and readiness for moving in this direction. So those are my main updates. Any questions for me on any other topics?
I'm wondering with the independent school approvals, especially in light of the new eligibility requirements set forth in Act 73. I know that we have a big backlog of independent schools that need to be reapproved or not by the State Board of Education. And I'm wondering if, once you get that list back from schools, the end of July, if the agency and the board can prioritize reviewing those independent schools that make the list of eligibility under Act 73. And my thinking for that is, I think that those schools, will continue to educate students, given the new criteria, as opposed to other schools where students are they're grandfathered until they matriculate or move on for whatever reason. So I think in my mind, it makes sense to prioritize the schools that will continue to receive funding under Act 73. And my thought too is all students are important, but it would be helpful to maybe focus on the schools that educate the most of our students. And if we can sort of ask the agency to prioritize the schools that make the Act 73 cut, as you're bringing schools up for the board to consider the request for reapproval.
I appreciate that suggestion. As you know, when we developed our approach to addressing the backlog, we did not use the new eligibility criteria as a basis to establish the prioritization or the scheduling of the review. So this would be a different criteria, which I think you make a good case for why that would be helpful. It will require us to pivot a little bit and then come back to you with an updated list of when certain schools would be ready for review. So I'm interested to see if that's also kind of a consensus point for the board, if that would be of interest for us to use that new eligibility criteria to prioritize the review of independent schools.
Tom?
Yeah, thank you. So we have, it looks like 6 schools coming before the committee on July 30th. Will your recommendation take into account those new criteria?
The 6 that are coming before you are not related to the eligibility criteria. So it might be that some of those will not be eligible based on the new criteria, but they would still have students that may continue their educational career there. And I think the question on the table is, given now that this has become law and it's effective, I do think it would make sense for us to reprioritize the review of independent schools and those that meet that eligibility criteria. But I think that's the question on the table. From my perspective, I'm comfortable making that shift, but I would just say that it might create a little bit of a delay, right? Because we kind of have queued up a list of schools, and we were not factoring in this eligibility criteria as we were trying to expedite the review and approval of all independent schools.
Thank you.
Tammy and then Cynthia.
And Tom, I would certainly be interested in your thoughts on this, but it seems like we have sort of two lanes here. We have schools that are going to be eligible under the new criteria and that need to come up for approval. And then we have a lane of schools that may not be eligible under the new criteria, however, that are still serving students and who are needing approval, right? They're in some stage of that. And it seems to me as if we need to obviously address those schools that need approval under the new criteria. However, we can't have a situation where we have students in independent schools, attending independent schools who are currently unapproved and may have been unapproved for quite a while, right? Because of the backlog. And some of those students, for example, if they're in first grade, they could be there 4 or 5 more years, right? So it seems to me for that second lane, we need to come up with a set of criteria for prioritizing how we work through that list. And perhaps some of those schools opt out of the approval process because they recognize they don't want to go through those additional efforts. But it seems like we should be prioritizing those schools based on the amount of time, right? So how far has it been in terms of time since they were last approved? How many students are attending those schools? And sort of how many students will be in those schools for, X number of years, right? And using those 3 criteria in a spreadsheet, we should be able to sort of sift and sort and come up with a priority order for how we start to work through that list. But I don't think it's the case we can just not go through the approval process for those schools if they still have students who are attending them.
So Tammy, you're talking about the students that don't meet the criteria, and I would love to hear your thoughts on the idea of prioritizing schools that do meet the criteria. And so not saying that we're not going to look at the entire universe of schools that are up for reapproval, but the question is, should we prioritize the schools that do meet the criteria? And then once we get through those, think about how to prioritize the schools that don't meet the criteria.
I guess I was thinking we would be working on parallel tracks because the schools who meet the criteria, obviously, I think that's a more obvious list, right? But I think sort of this prioritization of the other list needs to be happening at the same time, and we need to be transparent with the field and give those schools who may be dropping out the ability to make the right. It's a lot of work to go through an approval process, and some of these schools may opt out and just say it's not worth it to us, we're out. And that would be helpful to know, and it would be helpful for those schools to also have a schedule just coming up to think about sort of what the timeline might be. So it seems to me like we've got 2 things going on at the same time.
But to the question of like the agency brings forward, 4 to 6 schools per 2,200 committee meeting. So which 4 to 6 schools are they going to be bringing up first? What are the next set of 4 to 6 schools? Is it not random, but
no, it's not random.
Should we be looking at 4 to 6 schools that clearly meet the criteria and then move on to the next 4 to 6 schools that clearly meet the criteria?
Well, and how many schools are we talking? I mean, and I could be wrong, and Tom, jump in here. I thought the number of schools that met the criteria was not a very big number. And also that number needing approval wasn't a very big number. Am I misunderstanding?
I don't think we have
So I think my understanding was that we had 60 some schools that are in the backlog. It might be more than that now, but that's the number, 60 to 70 maybe. And I know Cynthia is got her hand up, so I think I'll wait for my other comment on this until she's gone. But remember, schools are approved until they're not. And so there might be an interim step where if we know that they don't have the number, then that distinction can be made right away. It doesn't mean that they can't go through a process, but the distinction about whether they're approved for public tuition can be made in a week from now, 2 weeks from now.
Tom, I think you and I are thinking on the same page, which is I think it would be helpful to have some more data around sort of those 60 schools and how they split into some of these criteria. And then it's hard to think about how to prioritize without sort of having those counts. But to your point, Tom, it may be that some of that backlog can take care of itself, is what I'm thinking. I suspect that there will be some schools who self-select off the list.
If I may make a recommendation, I think what would be helpful is for us to continue for the next couple weeks on the path that we're on and how we've prioritized the review of independent schools. Then once we have validated the data from independent schools and districts, which will be at the end of the month, we will have a better sense of the list of schools that will be eligible moving forward. And then we can come back with a new set of prioritization criteria in order of the review process and what would be brought forward to the committee every month. Because I think you're right. I mean, there's some of this work that will sort itself out as we finalize the list of schools that are eligible. But I think where we are now, we're on a path where we can make some progress and movement that I think is meaningful, that we can come back next month once we have certainty around the eligible schools and go forward with a different prioritization process.
I think that makes sense. Cynthia?
Actually, my questions were answered because they were really around the timing for the AOE to do a reassessment. And Zoe, you just answered that. My only concern was if we start to reassess the priority, that we were going to actually be out into September, October, which just puts us further behind. But it sounds like you're feeling comfortable that by August we could have information from the data to be able to make some decisions on that.
Certainly. Yes, I feel confident in that.
Great. Lyle?
Going down a slight rabbit hole, and I'll just name schools because it's what I'm thinking at the top of my head. But if a school like a Christ the King in Rutland, which is K-8, has students in it that are going to continue to receive public funding, they're a feeder school to MSJ 9 through 12. Is that considered a system, or are those two different schools? And maybe you can't answer that question today.
I think your question is related to the geographic criteria and which schools would be allowed to continue to receive public tuition. I think that the best way to answer these questions would be for next month for me to share the list of schools that no longer meet the geographic eligibility. And then the schools where we're certifying the data, those that meet that criteria. So that I think where we're headed now is talking about specific schools. And I think it's important that we do that in a way that's really clear and transparent, and also allows us time to communicate all of that to the schools as well and the districts.
Lyle, are you asking about a kid who's currently at Christ the King, and would that kid get tuitioned until they finish
MSJ, correct, right? Are they in it for 13 years or are they in it for 9? If they came in as a kindergartner, right? And maybe we'll get that answer later on.
I think we can ask Emily Simmons to weigh in. I think it's somewhat vague in the statute.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions for Zoe?
But it sounds like you know that question's going to come up, so.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Well, Zoe, thank you for that report. I appreciate the detail and the board conversation. Thank you. I think at this point we are somewhat ahead of schedule. The next item on the agenda is public comment specific to Paine Mountain. And what I might propose, just because I'm not sure, I know there are people who have signed up for public comment specific to this agenda item. I'm a little worried that we're so ahead of schedule that we might not capture everyone who signed up. So what I'd like to do is propose that we move on to item L and take that up, and then maybe just work through, well, we'll see where we are with the agenda, but I think it makes sense to me to certainly not start public comment so early at this point. So unless there's an objection, I'm going to scoot on to item L, which is State Board of Education work in response to Act 73, which is a nice follow-up to Zoe's presentation. So there are a couple of points to this agenda item. The first, and I know we've all kind of taken a look at Act 73, there are a number of assignments that have been given to the State Board of Education. Some of them have shorter deadlines than others. So this is really to talk about 2 upcoming deadlines and what I'd like to do to make sure that we comply with them. The first is that Act 73, Section 14 has amended 16 V.S.A. Section 3443 to create a state aid for school construction advisory board, which will advise the agency on this implementation of the state aid for school construction program in accordance with the provisions of the chapter, including the adoption of rules, setting of statewide priorities, criteria for project approval, and recommendations for project approval and prioritization. Pursuant to the Act, the chair of the State Board of Education or designee is named as one of the ex officio members of the advisory board. So that would be me, but I've spoken with Rich and asked if he would be willing to be my designee on the advisory board, and he has agreed to do that. So absent any objection, I'm going to delegate this position to Rich to serve on that board. And Rich, I do believe you're going to have to coordinate with Maureen and Suzanne, because I think you, as the designee, need to call the first meeting to order, I think by August 1st. So you guys can get working on that. But absent any objection, I'm going to thank Rich for stepping up and serving this capacity. Thank you. And then the second point is that Section 8 of the Act requires the board to submit a written report to the House and Senate Education Committees on education by December 1st, 2025, with proposed standards for schools to be deemed small by necessity or sparse by necessity. Those are terms of art. I know that Tammy, in her professional capacity, has done a lot of research on this topic, but I think it's important for this proposal to come from the board. And so what I'd like to do is stand up a committee to explore this issue and then come back to the full board in time to then meet this December 1st deadline. So I've asked Brian and Cynthia if they would be willing to serve on a committee with Tammy. I've also asked Tammy, just to put that out there, to then be a 3-person committee to really look at the small by necessity and sparse by necessity. So with that in mind, I would entertain a motion that the State Board of Education establish a committee charged with developing proposed standards for schools to be deemed small by necessity or sparse by necessity in accordance with Act 73 of 2025, Section 8. Bring its recommendation before the full board for a discussion and vote, such that the board shall submit a written report to the House and Senate Committees on Education with its proposed standards on or before December 1st, 2025.
I'll make
So
that
moved.
motion.
I'll second it.
All right, moved by Rich, seconded by Tom. Any discussion? Hearing none, and Maureen, I can send you that motion language. All those in favor of approving the motion, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, please raise your hand and signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries. And the second motion is I will entertain a motion that the State Board of Education authorize its chair to appoint members to the newly constituted Small Schools and Sparse Schools Standards Committee.
I'll make that motion.
So I'll second
All
it.
right, moved by Rich, seconded by Tom. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the motion, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please raise your hand and signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. And as discussed, I'm going to appoint Tammy, Brian, and Cynthia to the committee. So you guys, again, can work with Maureen and Suzanne to schedule committee meetings. And I think whenever you have your first committee meeting, we will start looking for reports back to the board at our monthly meetings. So thank you all for agreeing to do this work, because I think it will be really helpful, and look forward to working on this with you guys. Okay. I think I'm also going to do future meeting planning, as long as we're kind of at that point in the agenda. Just looking at my list, we will have a new student that I will administer the oath of allegiance and affirmation of office, and we will welcome Brianna to the board at our next meeting. We will have the special education advisory panel update, since Katie Ballard was not able to be with us here today. We will also have teacher of the year presentations. And I remember, Zoe, that last year, some of the comments, the feedback was it would be helpful if board members had the teacher of the year candidate platforms in the agenda packet to be able to review in advance of their presentations, as well as the scoring rubric, so that we're all ready to go once they start presenting.
Fair request.
Thank you. I think we will also have, this is just a little bit of housekeeping, the Wyndham Northeast Union Elementary School District has renamed its school district to the Athens Grafton School District. They made that change, I think, over a year ago. It's already been approved by the Secretary of Education, but I think before it can be approved by the Secretary of State, the State Board of Ed needs to sign off on that as well. So this was something that just landed in my inbox, I think, Monday afternoon. Didn't have time to put it on today's agenda, but we will pick that up in August and get that taken care of. Also, from what I hear from Tom, it looks like we'll have 4 to 6 independent school approvals, commission update, secretary update, committee updates. Anything else? Great. So that's it.
I'm wondering about Zoe being added on for updating the prioritization. She'll probably give us a report on that.
Good point. Thank you.
Be happy to.
Okay, and of course, if anything else comes up between now and then, we will take care of it, put it on the agenda. I think also there was a little bit of a question about whether we'd be in person or virtual. Unless people really feel the need to travel to a meeting in August, I think maybe it makes sense to continue to be virtual through our next monthly meeting. In case anyone happens to be out of town, you can just remote in, and that might be easier for people to do that. Yes, Tom.
Just backtracking a little bit, looking at the deliverables that we have, it looks like we need to reopen some rule series. Do you have an idea of the timeline for when we would do that?
So we need, by statute, we need to reopen both 2200 and EQS by August 1st of 2026, mostly to deal with the minimum class size updates, and there are a few other things. My thought on that, Tom, is to hold off on that work, at least for now, for a couple of reasons, because I think what I'd really like to do is get through some independent school reapprovals. And then we also have, this December 1st deadline that we'll be working for on the small by necessity, sparse by necessity. The other thing, just to be, what's going through my head, is that Act 73 has a bunch of deadlines and requirements, but a lot of that hinges on the legislature agreeing to redistricting and what those districts are going to look like. And my understanding is if they don't reach agreement on that, a lot of those other deadlines become irrelevant or moot. So I kind of want to give time for that work to get started and, really see how things are going in the legislative session, starting in January of next year. I think August 1st of 2026 gives us a fair amount of time to, wait and see how things are going in the legislature before we, stand up new committees to do that work. So my thought is, let's talk about this in the springtime.
Okay. The other question was about CTE rules and where the status of that work.
So hold on just a second. My thought with that is I think we now have the funding to do that, particularly because, last fiscal year, we were sort of in this funny position where we had money, but it wasn't enough money to do anything. Like we couldn't put an attorney on retainer. We couldn't hire an attorney to help us with the CTE rule updates because we didn't have money in the budget to even allow a fraction of that work to get started. But the upshot is we didn't spend all of the money that was in our FY25 budget. So we have carryover. And I think what I would like to do is with this invitation to bid for an attorney to be on retainer for the board, that attorney would, kind of be there if we need him or her, if the legal questions arise. That attorney would also be able to help us with our next assignment under Act 73, which is to review all of the board's rules and see, which rules need to be updated, which rules need to be sunsetted, which rules don't need to be rules and could be policy, and which rules could be transferred to another, agency or organization. So that's kind of the second bucket of work that I'm envisioning that attorney would do. And then the third bucket would be to help us with the rule updates. So once that contract becomes effective, and again, like I'm finalizing with the AG's office the language of that invitation to bid. So bid will be sent out, then we'll have to give it a couple of weeks for attorneys to submit, their interest. We'll look into, who has applied, conduct some interviews, and then get the person signed up. At that point, we'll have an attorney and we'll have money to help us with rule updates. So
Thank you.
Yeah, we're getting close, I think. Any other questions? Okay. So I think if the board is okay with this, why don't we take a break now? This might be kind of an extended break. Why don't we come back at 10:10? And what I'm hoping is that anyone who's on the call now who's signed up for public comment specific with regard to Paine Mountain, we can start with those members of the public first, so we can start at 10:10. I know this item has been scheduled for 10:20, so anyone who isn't hearing what I'm saying right now and doesn't show up till 10:20, then they would be sort of later on that list of people.
You were at 10:10 to start public comment. So I mean, I think if you've got members here now and you're giving them a couple minutes each, and if you have 10 people, I just start rocking and rolling now.
I don't know if everyone's here, and I wouldn't want to, burn through, the people who are there and finish before 10:20 when other people might think that's the time for them to show up. So I'm sensitive to the fact you have.
Yeah, but it was 10:10 was the time on your agenda.
Is it 10:10?
Yeah, for public comment.
Oh.
10:20 was to discuss the request, but public comment was at 10:10. And I think that when I counted earlier, you had like 6 or 7 of them.
So my agenda says 10:20 for public comment and then 10:50 for the discussion.
That's just mine.
Yeah. I have a different agenda then.
It might have changed because Rich, you get yours mailed to you, so it's possible.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. But why don't we take a 20-minute break? Let's come back at 10:10, and then we will pick up the public comment and then move right into the requested delay. The other thing I will say before we sign off is I have communicated with both Dan Morris, who is the vice chair of Paine Mountain, as well as Matthew Flynn, who's the vice chair of Echo Valley. And they were wondering if they were going to have an opportunity again to address the board as they did last month. What I suggested to them is that I'm going to have them go, they were already on the list of people to speak. We've asked generally members of the public to limit themselves to 2 minutes. What I suggested to Dan and to Matthew is that they would each have 5 minutes. And I'm going to start, we're going to go through everyone else. And then the final 2 people to address the board will be first Dan, since he's the one who's brought this request before the board, and then Matthew. They will each be given 5 minutes. They will each be allowed to reserve time if they want in order to be able to respond to the other person. Whatever they want to do is up to them, but total amount of time each will be 5 minutes, which is to say we have a list of people, but that order is going to adjust slightly so that Dan and Matthew go last. So with that, I will see you all at 10:10. Thank you. For our break, we're going to let everyone other than Dan Morris, the vice chair of Paine Mountain, and Matthew Flynn, the vice chair of Echo Valley, provide their public comment to the board first. We will end with Dan and Matthew. And just to recap, general members of the public, we ask you to limit your public comments to 2 minutes. Dan and Matthew will have 5 minutes each. They may reserve time so that they can respond to the other person. That's up to them in their judgment. At the end of their 5 minutes, we will close off public comment, and then we will have a board discussion and potential vote on this issue. So, and Rich Warner is going to be keeping time. If you're just joining us and you're a member of the public, Rich is going to raise his hand at the 1 minute and 45 second mark, and he's going to put his hand down at the 2 minute mark. And so I will also follow Rich's lead and just, say 15 seconds and then time when you get to your time. Any questions before we get into this?
I have one.
Yes.
Me?
Yes, Suzette Pollard.
Okay, sorry, thank you. The email that I got from Maureen when I asked to be on this agenda as a member of the public was around 2 minutes. I think I'm about 20 seconds over. I would just appreciate, that was what the message was that I received. I think I can cut a piece of it as I go, but I would appreciate
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Without further ado, why don't we have members of the public raise their hands, and then I'll just go in the order in which I see the hands. Okay, Suzette, I'll start with you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Suzette Bollard, and I'm a retired superintendent, and I'm asking to speak today not because I'm a resident of CVSU, but because I believe I have a unique perspective from my long institutional history with these towns and school districts. I was employed in Williamstown, Washington, and Orange as a music teacher in 1982, and worked up through the administrative ranks. I served the Orange North Supervisory Union, whose member districts were Orange, Washington, and Williamstown, as a superintendent for 9 years. Beginning in 2009, and the Central Vermont Supervisory Union, member districts Paine Mountain and Echo Valley, for 3 years beginning in 2018. When I was superintendent of the ONSU, there was a 9-member supervisory union board, 3 members appointed by each of the 3 school districts, Orange, Washington, and Williamstown. These were 3 very independent school districts who approached their work at the SU level through the lens of everybody's kids are everybody's kids. They worked almost seamlessly together through meaningful discussion and a collaborative mindset. My time with the CVSU board was the same. School district board members are elected by their individual towns to serve and represent their municipalities in school district business. The makeup of the school district boards is outlined in their articles of agreement. On the other hand, supervisory board members are appointed by their local school board to represent their school district, not their towns, on supervisory union business. The number of representatives serving on the SU board, as you know, is outlined in statute, 3 members per school district. In Northfield's case, if the Paine Mountain School Board wanted to appoint 3 Northfield members to represent them at the SU level, they would be free to do so. I believe that the state board has been asked to solve a problem that doesn't exist. CVSU has been operational for 7 years with no history of contentiousness. In fact, by Paine Mountain's own admission, in the case of changing their cost-sharing model, they have demonstrated the ability to face a challenge head-on and work until it is resolved satisfactorily for both districts. They should be proud of that and be proud of that, and under the leadership of the superintendent, identify the practices that have led to the almost seamless collaboration. If Northfield is concerned about its role, they should address that with Paine Mountain Board. I fear if the state board were to reorganize the makeup of the CVSU board, that it would sow a threat of mistrust and signal the beginning of an erosion of the collaborative will of Paine Mountain and Echo Valley. I urge the state board to deny Paine Mountain's request. Thank you.
And let me just say, I don't think the board has received your written comments. If you'd like to submit them for inclusion in the agenda, please do so.
I did so. Thank you. Just earlier today. I appreciate that.
Oh, and I'm realizing you might have been Susie. All right. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Joss Dobrovich, did I say that correctly? All right.
Yes, you did. Hi, I'm Joshua Dobrovich, a Williamstown resident with 2 children in Williamstown Elementary School, currently serving on both Paine Mountain School District Board and the Central Vermont Supervisory Union Board. I've submitted written comments and will use this time to share a summary of them with some examples. I urge you to reject PMSD's proposal to reconfigure the CVSU board from an equal 3-3 split to an unequal and favoring PMSD. This change would disenfranchise Echo Valley Community School District, violate Vermont law, and undermine our supervisory union's collaborative mission. The current 3-3 structure, mandated by 16 V.S.A. Section 266, ensures equal representation for PMSD and EVCSD, fostering a balanced governance. PMSD's proposed unequal split, such as 4-2 or 5-1, would give PMSD majority control, sidelining EVCSD's rural communities on critical decisions like hiring superintendents and setting budgets. This violates 16 V.S.A. 261D, which prohibits disproportionate representation unless it serves the public interest, in which this does not serve the entire public interest. Reducing EVCSD's voice risks eroding local control, a concern shared by rural districts across Vermont. On June 21st, 2023, PMSD's board voted 5-3 to stop pursuing CVSU's reorganization, reflecting a commitment to equity. The issue resurfaced when EVCSD requested budget appropriationing based on actual enrollment, as required by 16 V.S.A. 4010A. Since equalized pupil is obsolete, highlighting the need for fair governance, not unequal representation. Some argue PMSD needs. Ooh. All right. Well, I'm not going to get through it all, but there's a claim that PMSD shoulders more responsibilities like signing payroll. That can be addressed through discussions and changes in how we do assignments. So, in closing, the 3-3 structure promotes collaboration, fairness, aligning with CVSU's mission and Vermont's commitment to equitable education under 16 V.S.A. 165. Please uphold the 3-3 split to protect our rural communities and ensure democratic governance. I hope you all read my longer comments because my written ones were way more in depth. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. Okay, next I see Rama Schneider.
Yes, good morning. My name is Rama Schneider, and I am a resident of the Paine Mountain School District who lives in Williamstown. I'm not going to rehash my submitted statement. I hope it made enough impact that the main points will be remembered here and now. I would like to clarify one point in my statement. I referred to equalized student regarding the provision of SU services, but that is an outdated term that reflects when I last served on a school board. Vermont has moved to a similar but updated formula of weighting students So I'd like to re-emphasize an extremely important point. There are no, and I want to repeat that, no SU services that are provided according to weighted student counts. Student weighting is a mechanism for determining a school district's funding and resulting taxes. It is not used for determining the provision of services to a student. One more quick thought. I am very disappointed by the heavy emphasis on towns and school boards in this discussion. Supervisory unions and their board representation is about the schools and, most importantly, the student as an individual and the student body as a group. The state board's focus should be exclusively on those needs. I believe that focus requires maintaining equality on the SU board. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, next I see Michael Cont'd.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. Mike Cont'd, resident of Orange, also board member of Echo Valley and Central Vermont SU. The default for SU 16 V.S.A 261 is equal representation for each school district. It's not equal representation based on school district population. Each district needs an equal seat at the table. Proportional voting rights based on population may work for fully unified school districts or supervisory districts, but not with Central Vermont SU, which houses two separate unified school districts, both with 2 towns each. If the SBE, the State Board of Education, allows this departure from the norm, it's likely to generate many reorganization requests that privilege large districts over small, as well as ensuing requests from smaller districts to reorganize into more equitable SUs with equal representation. Given that H 454 is now law, reorganization is no longer hypothetical, with working groups making decisions this fall concerning reorganization. Now is not the time to introduce more change to an SU that is working well. The decision the state board is contemplating is like putting the cart before the horse. Section 4 of this new bill establishes school district voting board working group. Furthermore, the state is budgeting over $200,000 towards this initiative, and making a decision now is premature, as it signals to the state that the State Board of Education already knows the answers and outcomes before the dedicated task force has even had a chance to do their job. Some of the examples in Dan's letter are much different than CVSU, which has, like I said, 2 unified union districts and 2 towns each. If we took Bennington and Rutland SU as one example, Taconic and Green Regional District covers 9 towns and gets 5 votes, whereas Medowee School District covers 2 towns and gets 3 votes, which is the standard. And Winall covers 1 town, doesn't even operate a school, and gets 1 vote, which again is the standard. The point here is, I think, and I can go down all the other ones, but I'm running out of time. The point is, I think all these examples actually support the idea that the SU are based on district and towns as entities, not as population. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I see Emily Gray.
Hi, folks. Thanks for letting me have a chance to talk. Just a couple of things. I have written comments that I won't rehash, but it strikes me that the Echo Valley and Paine Mountain are not equal districts. Yes, they're 2 towns, but we have a town with a couple of tiny schools and no high school and school choice, and then we have 2 towns with a much more complex situation. So it's not just about population. The districts are just not this, or the 2 districts are just not the same. I haven't heard any specific ways that Echo Valley could be harmed by a proportional representation. Echo Valley would, retains its own school district. Paine Mountain also has elementary and middle schools, and so those interests are well represented there. I think our towns are really similar. So in nothing that I've seen can I hear anything about what the harms could be to Echo Valley for proportional representation. But I have 2 examples of potential harms, and actually real harms, to Paine Mountain. One of them is as it relates to the high schools. So the superintendent answers to the SU. In CVSU, what we have is an SU where half of the members of the SU have no interest in the high schools. They don't have high schools. They don't send their kids to these high schools. And yet these high schools are very complex and they need a lot of attention from the superintendent. So there's an example of a very real harm that could and has resulted from this disproportional representation. If the superintendent who's working for that, so the superintendent's focus, it would be naturally toward the lower grades. The second thing is about superintendent hiring, also hired by the SU. I think the disproportionate and disenfranchisement of voters in Northfield and Williamstown will become a major issue next time there needs to be a superintendent hire. So those are two examples of real harms to Paine Mountain School District by this disproportionate representation. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we have other people who have signed up to speak. Don't see anyone yet. I still have Terry Real, I believe, Maria Royal and Clifton. Oh, maybe Maria Royal and Clifton Long. I think they said they were not able to attend. Is that right, Maureen? I think.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
And Jessica Foster, was she able to attend?
That was still tentative. I don't know for sure on her.
Don't know that Terry submitted any written comments, but no, I don't see any written comments. Well, I will say we are 10 minutes over the stated time of when we were going to start. So unless there are any other members of the public who wish to speak on this item, whether or not you've signed up or not. All right, well, Dan, I'm going to hand it over to you. You've got 5 minutes, and if you want to reserve time, just let Rich know so that he can calculate accordingly.
Thanks, everybody. Y'all can hear me?
Yes.
I'm coming to you from a community college in the Outer Banks. I'm on my family vacation, so thank you so much for taking the time to consider Paine Mountain's request, and I appreciate being in front of you all again for this meeting. Just for folks who maybe didn't have a chance to attend the last meeting or read the agenda packet materials, I just want to kind of summarize Paine Mountain's request to reconstitute the CVSU board. It's really pretty straightforward. Vermont law, specifically 16 V.S.A. 719C, authorizes the State Board of Education to, quote, adjust the supervisory union board representation required by Section 266 of this title to more fairly and accurately reflect the relative number of students for which each district is responsible and the grades for which the district operates a school or schools, end quote. Paine Mountain voted in a public board meeting on November 6, 2024, to petition this board to adjust the CVSU composition from its current allocation of 3 seats for Paine Mountain and 3 seats for Echo Valley to an organizational structure that would more closely reflect the fact that Paine Mountain serves 80% of the students in CVSU and Echo Valley serves only 20%. There have been 3 moments when the current 3-3 split was felt by Paine Mountain community members most acutely. One of them was when we hired a new superintendent. It felt like the 3-3 split was unduly magnifying Echo Valley's voice and diminishing Paine Mountain's. Another was in considering mergers with other districts, most clearly the Lincoln School District issue. And the third was when Act 127 was implemented, we shifted from apportioning special ed costs based on equalized pupil, which then went away, to actual enrollment. And many people in the PMSD communities felt like if we are to apportion special ed costs by actual enrollment, it's not clear why we wouldn't do the same for board seats, right? In each of these conversations, the disproportionate board seat allocation, which diminishes the voice of Paine Mountain students and community members, has been pretty distressing for people in our two towns. Agenda materials for the last SBE meeting and for today's meeting include a green sheet written by Secretary Saunders' office that recognizes the fact that Paine Mountain's student population is, quote, substantially larger than Echo Valley's. The green sheet recommends reconstituting the CVSU board to give Paine Mountain 4 seats and Echo Valley 2 seats. Another option that the Secretary's office finds agreeable is a 5-3 split. My sense, based on conversations with community members and representatives on our district board, is that either of these structures would meet the concerns of the PMSD board and community. In fact, on May 3rd, 2023, the PMSD board voted 7-2 to approve a 4-2 split on the CVSU board, and I'm confident that a 4-2 split would still satisfy Paine Mountain's concerns today. The only other thing I would add to this summary of kind of where we stand with this request is that I was able to find data about proportional board seat allocation in SUs across the state of Vermont. It turns out that 5 other supervisory unions in Vermont do, in fact, apportion board seats to member districts in proportion with student population and not in a flatly equal way, which is what CVSU does now. For example, the Bennington-Rutland SU board gives 5 seats to Taconic and Green Regional School District, 3 board seats to Meadowy School District, and 1 to Windhall. Loyal North SU gives 13 seats to LNM UUSD and 6 to Cambridge. Wyndham Central SU gives 2 to Marlborough, 3 to River Valleys, 1 to Stratton, 6 to West River, and 1 to Wyndham. Wyndham Southeast SU gives 1 seat to Vernon and 4 to Wyndham Southeast School District, and Windsor Southwest SU gives 3 to Heartland, 6 to Mount Ascutney, and 3 to Weathersfield. These examples show that reconstituting the CVSU board to be a more proportionate reflection of the students served would not make our SU an outlier. Many other SUs already take this same approach. I ask the board to vote today to change the makeup of CVSU board to allocate 4 SU board seats to Paine Mountain School District and 2 SU board seats to Echo Valley. If our case is not a clear example of why reconstituting SU boards in favor of proportionality is the fair thing to do, I'm not sure what case would be, and I'm also not sure why 16 V.S.A. 719C was codified into statute in the first place. Thanks so much for listening to my comments.
Thank you, Dan. All right, Matthew, I'll turn it over to you, Matthew Finn.
Hi, hello, everybody. It's actually Flynn, F-L-I-N-N.
I realized as soon as I said that. Yeah.
It's really fine. It's a common mistake.
Thank you.
I am going to start just by simply saying, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Matthew Flynn. First and foremost, I am a proud public school teacher of 21 years. I also serve as the vice chair of the Echo Valley Community School District Board, and I am the current chair of the Central Vermont Supervisory Union Board, the one we're talking about today. Thank you for your time and service to Vermont's community schools. I know you are already weighing a great deal, and I respectfully ask that you include everything before you, the letters, the petitions, the many public comments, in your careful deliberations of this important matter. I also want to be clear, I do not want to be here today. I do not want to stand here answering for a breach of trust that never occurred, but that some fear might occur someday. I would much rather be working to meet the very real needs of our students. And I also do not want to say that what I'm about to say about Chair Morris. It is not in my nature to criticize colleagues in public, but today I must. Although I would far prefer to be working side by side with him as fellow members of the CVSU board on the work that lies ahead of us. This petition is the first of its kind in Vermont. Whatever you decide will set a precedent, not only for supervisory unions statewide, but also for the redistricting committee's work ahead. There is a troubling subtext in this petition that the people in smaller towns like ours are somehow less intelligent, less capable, less trustworthy in governance matters. While only one resident in all of the submissions says this almost outright, it is, however, subtly present in the language used in other support letters and in Chair Morris's tone in the June 18th meeting video. That stereotype, however, does not reflect our reality. Rather, Echo Valley's towns are filled with thoughtful, engaged citizens. Our communities include educators, doctors, lawyers, farmers, daycare providers, business owners, service workers, and even a state commissioner. So demographically, we are nearly identical to Northfield and Williamstown. Chair Morris defends his petition with nothing but hypotheticals, claiming that Echo Valley might someday block SU policy. On June 18th, here in front of the board, he said, and I'm paraphrasing, "It has not been a problem, but it could be. And to be more proportionate would ensure those conversations reflect our, meaning Paine Mountain's, community's values." The truth is, there is no conflict, no policy dispute, no pattern of bad faith from Echo Valley whatsoever. The Paine Mountain petition rests entirely on speculation and not on fact. Chair Morris has even defended our position himself. He repeatedly acknowledged the Echo Valley's cooperative spirit on the CVSU board. If the justification is it has not happened, but it might, then the whole rationale for dismantling equal representation falls completely apart. Speculation rooted in fear is not a sound basis for changes to our governance structure. You have been told that the petition reflects broad support in the Paine Mountain School District. That is simply not true. Echo Valley has over 100 public opponents. Paine Mountain has just 5 supporters. If Northfield and Williamstown had participated at the same rate as Echo Valley, there would be 472 supporters, not 5. Also, only 3 of 9 Paine Mountain School Board members have publicly supported the petition since its passage in November. 2 others approved the petition for a total of 5 at that November 16th meeting that Dan mentioned, or excuse me, November 6th meeting. Meanwhile, respected current members like Josh, who you just heard from, and Dr. Matt Sullivan have spoken out against it. And at former Paine Mountain School Board members, Mike Bailey and Rama Schneider, who you just heard from as well. This is not a mandate. At best, this petition represents a community that has not clearly expressed its widespread support for this change. And you can clearly see there's a divided board. The petition is not simply about board seats. Since the merger, Echo Valley paid an estimated $2 to $3 million more than it should have under that outdated cost-sharing formula. That error was corrected less than a year ago over the objections of the very Paine Mountain School Board members who are now leading this petition. If Paine Mountain gains majority control, that will prevent them from reversing that correction. Excuse me, what will prevent them from reversing that correction and shifting those costs back onto our towns? Why do we believe that this is a real concern? Well, Chair Morris's record to date is something to consider. He rushed an attempt to cut Echo Valley's board seats last fall. He has false claims about Paine Mountain's role in hiring and evaluating the superintendent, selective use about board structure data, repeated use of false or fear-based hypotheticals. This, we believe, is the true breach of trust in this situation. The petition is not really about creating a better, more functional governance model. It is about consolidating power and retaliating against decisions that Paine Mountain could not prevent. There is no legal requirement. I'm done. I'm sorry about that. I will stop.
Thank you. Rich, does Dan still, or how much time does Dan have left?
No, they both went over, and they both went over within a second of each other, the same amount of time.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to stop it there. I want to first thank everyone who submitted comments to the board. I read every one of them, and it was really helpful for me to read the different perspectives. And I know that it's summertime. I just want to acknowledge the fact that people took the time to submit written testimony as well as to appear here today. So thank you. And Dan and Matthew, I also want to thank you guys for helping to sort of flesh things out for the board's discussion. So this has been really helpful, and I'm really glad that we had this opportunity today to look at this more in depth. But at this point, I'm going to close off public comment and start the board's discussion of Paine Mountain's request. And I guess at this point, I would just ask board members if anyone wants to jump in with any observations about anything that you've read or heard. Rich.
I had a quick question and I'm a little confused and I'm not sure, I couldn't find it easily. With the change, so there was a recommendation on the green sheet that we approve this, but I don't know, the recommendation doesn't.
I think there's not like specific language that, you could say, I move, blah, blah, blah. I think the secretary's green sheet left that a bit open-ended because under the statute, we as a board can choose to leave things as they are. We can choose to change it. And really, we have full discretion here. So we could do nothing. We could add 1 member, 2 members, whatever we want to do. And I think that's why it was open-ended.
So where I was going is, Mr. Morris mentioned WCSU, of which I chaired that for almost 25 years. And when we did Act 46, we did have to reorganize the WCSU to make it more manageable and because there had been some collaboration on districts. But one of the things we were very specific in doing was that we didn't want to make it so that one district could control the entire SU and the votes. So we heard a 5-3 split and a 4-2 split. And my question is, and I don't know who can answer it, is what would be the voting that would not allow one district to just be able to ride roughshod over the other? And I don't think there is in this one. And I think that's a little difference in between. And I'm not really, in all the stuff I read, I couldn't figure that out. So I don't know who would be the right person to answer that. And I don't know if we would, I know that, I didn't know if Zoe could answer that, and I don't know if she's still here, or Emily, but I'd like some help with that before I would be able to vote.
Well, and I think if we change, oh, Emily's there. Emily, you can answer.
May not be able to. I wanted you to see that I was here. Rich, maybe you could pose your question to me again because it was a little wide ranging. Is this specifically about the proposed 4-2 composition?
Well, my question is I'm a little confused on the way this only involves 2 different districts, is my understanding, and a total of 6 seats. And there was a talk, well, it's got to be 8 seats because there was a 5-3 split and then there was a 4-2 split, which would be 6 seats. I'm not sure. Can you explain to me again how many districts there are, how many seats total, and could we put together something that would change the total number of seats? Because what I'm looking to is I don't think, and I think both sides agreed that it shouldn't be that one district or one group of voters could be able to change to override the other one, that there would have to be collaboration. But I don't know if in this district that could happen. And because I was comparing to our district, the WCSU, where even the largest voting block of groups can't vote something, they can't override everybody else. If everybody else voted for A, they couldn't override B. Does that make sense?
That helps a lot. So I can clarify that there are 2 districts in the supervisory union. So that is a set limit here. The board is not limited to a total number of seats of 6 or any other number. So you can choose a representation model that would enlarge the SU board beyond the size that it is now. The statute permits you to do that.
But if we did that, it still could be one district, because it's only two districts, two separate districts, one district could always outvote the other district.
Right, you do have the limit of the two districts that are in the supervisory union. Well,
Okay.
actually, you don't. The state board by statute also is given authority to draw supervisory union lines and assign districts to supervisory unions. That would be a different process, not warned today, but it is one of the state board's standing authorities.
Okay, thank you. That helps me a lot. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so just to sort of clarify, so right now, Rich, it's 3 members from each school district on the SU board. We can change that to any number we want or not. If we do change it and apportion more seats to Paine Mountain, there is always going to be the possibility that they can band together and push the agenda, because they could outvote Echo Valley. And I think that's what Echo Valley is concerned about. I will say, up until this point, ironically, this SU board has struck me as a very high functioning board. I have to say it concerns me more than a little that, ironically, this very request is making the SU board dysfunctional. And I worry too when SUs, like my supervisory union, their motto is all our kids are all our kids, where the SU has committed to looking at students regardless of where they live. What I'm seeing is a whole lot of focus on where people live in a way that frankly concerns me, because I think it's undermining the very mission of the SU. How do you raise an issue without raising an issue? But I feel like raising this issue has caused problems.
But I also see the difference, and this is one of the tough things that our SU has always struggled with, where it's a whole different world when all you supervise is an elementary school, or just supervise tuition to pay to places, or supervise a high school. And I've always said that I was so glad I served on a board that didn't have to worry about a high school, because it's a lot easier just worrying about an elementary school. So this is a really, just like I said, I've really been trying to read this and study this, and it's a really, really difficult decision. And I do appreciate both sides, and especially the 2 5-minute people did a really good job and just confused me even worse. So thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Tammy, and then Lyle.
I think this is just a similar clarification. I read through all the materials, and I certainly appreciate everyone being so thoughtful in presenting their arguments. I just want to clarify, when the supervisory union sort of came together, when Paine Mountain and Echo Valley came together, this was voted on by the electorate, correct? The existing structure and the existing voting was voted on by the electorates of both constituencies, correct?
I see Matthew.
So,
yes.
Yeah, I just want to confirm that. So we have a structure right now that these 2 districts entered into a number of years ago, voluntarily so, that then was voted on and approved by all of the towns that are associated with these 2 districts, correct? Okay, so to me, that's a pretty substantial thing in my sort of estimation, right? And so what I'm understanding the request to be is for the state board to step in and sort of rearrange things in what was a voluntary agreement, and an agreement that was voted on by the electorate of towns. And I just want to put that out there. I just want to be clear that is actually the request to the board, that we would undo all of those voluntary agreements and sort of those votes if we were to make a change.
Rama Schneider just dropped in the text, the merger committee could not address the structure of the SU because there was no existing merged SU at that point. Thus, the default 3-3 board was required upon merger.
I understand.
I was going to add
that's helpful,
that, Tammy,
but that was still approved, correct, by the electorate, or no?
Tammy, I don't think so, because in our district, we voted to merge districts, which was a vote of that specific district. So the town of Dover, Wardsboro, and Marlboro voted to make a district. The West River people voted.
Right.
All these different people voted, and then the SU reorganized and made a recommendation based on the changes, and it was just the board members that voted. And it was just the SU board
So
members that made that
it would be helpful.
recommendation.
Yeah, so it would be helpful for me to have clarification around that, because I think from my perspective, it's a different request to the state board to sort of upend what may have been agreements that were made, right, and votes that were taken versus something that was an administrative decision.
Emily Gray says the SU was approved. The 3-3 split was not in the text of what was voted on. I did see reference to, from a couple of people who submitted public comment, that it was in the Articles of Agreement. And I emailed the people back and I said, I can't find the Articles of Agreement online to corroborate that, and asked if they could find me a copy. I did not get a response, but I did see that in 2 public comments.
So just to clarify, as I'm understanding is, there was not a vote of the electorate on the existing split that we see now. This was something that was decided administratively.
I think the default is the 3-3 split. And it doesn't sound like.
But up until now, there was never an objection to that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Lyle and then Cynthia.
Thank you. So when I get up in the morning, I want to make sure that I don't do any harm. And what I'm hearing is that there's no urgency here. I'm not sure that there is an issue, and I'm not convinced there's an issue. And given the fact that the redistricting task force has a proposed timeline as outlined in Act 73, I wonder if we should consider tabling this request and any action on this request or similar requests, so that we're able to consider the report that the redistricting task force will come out with. I would hate to do something now and then have to undo a change that we might make just because there's going to be another change that needs to happen. It does not make sense to me at all.
I'm not sure if that's a motion or just an observation, Lyle.
That's an observation, and I would be happy to make a motion if, after we have some more discussion here. I don't want to be premature.
Cynthia?
Yeah, Jen, I just wanted to, whoops, sorry, there we go. I wanted to echo your comments, from being a chair of the Kingdom East School District, there was unequal representation per towns, and yet over time, it was never a consideration. We were as concerned with a child in Newark as we were as a child in Concord. So, understanding that lens and approach, I think, is really important, and I echo your comments. If we are to vote to make a change, I'd like us to really consider the 5-3 model, that I think having more members on the board may actually be advantageous versus less in that structure and in decision making, and also in collaboration.
Thank you. Mohammed, I think I saw your hand was raised.
I'd echo Lyle and Cynthia. Sorry. I'll stop it there.
Caleb and Tom, I don't think I've heard from you. Oh, Mohammed, did you have more to say? I'm sorry.
No, I'm all set. No.
Okay.
Thanks.
Tom?
Yeah, so I appreciate both what you have said and Lyle has said. I'm not clear that while they're half the board would not necessarily have a vested interest in what happens at the high school. I'm not sure there's evidence that they have been disinterested in what happens at the high school. I'm not sure what the how they've broken ties in the past as a high functioning board when it's been a 3-3 split, if that's ever happened. And I'm not sure what the problem would be in the hiring of a superintendent as it's projected in the future. So all through reading all the testimony, I was looking for what the actual problem was, what the negative effects have been of this split, and I couldn't see any really that would justify reorganizing the board. So again, I agree with what you have said, Jennifer, and what Lyle has just said.
And I will tack on to that. As I was reading through, I think it was the minutes of various meetings, I did see that the last superintendent search, which maybe was the first superintendent search, the SU board put together a search committee that was comprised of, I believe, 10 people from Paine Mountain and 4 people from Echo Valley. And that 14-person, which was very Paine Mountain heavy, that 14-person search committee, did the search and then brought their recommendations to the SU board. And if I'm remembering correctly, it's a 6-person SU board. 1 person was not there, but it was a 5-0 unanimous decision in favor of the superintendent. So, I look at that as a creative way for a 2-district SU that has, differences in populations to find ways to be equitable in their search for a superintendent, which is obviously going to be focusing not just on elementary schools, but also on high schools within that SU. So that's one thing. The other thing I did notice in the minutes is that this issue had been raised before. It was voted on by Paine Mountain, and then at some point, the board voted to withdraw the petition. And then it happened again this past fall, whether coincidentally or not, I don't know, after the reapportionment of the special education costs. So, much like you, I was looking at this through the lens of what problem is the board being asked to solve? What problem exists that has manifested? And that's the only, I wouldn't even call it a problem, but that's the only issue that I could find other than, the frank acknowledgement that there is a disproportionate population between the 2 school districts. But I also see evidence of them working collaboratively in the past to account for that. Mohammed, I see your, actually, I think Caleb's hand was up. Let me go to Caleb because I haven't heard from him yet.
I mean, honestly, I don't think I have anything too interesting to say other than I really don't see it as necessary. I mean, I definitely don't think we should make a decision based on changes that are going to happen multiple years in the future. I don't think that should be a determining factor in our decision. However, I still don't see it as necessary to change what's already there. As Kyle said, I don't believe that there's any need to cause potential damage in what's already functioning. If it's broke, don't fix it.
Thank you. Cynthia, did you want to add something?
Just a really quick that the students who are in elementary school are moving on to the high school. So I would make the assumption that there would be a vested interest in the high school by all board members. So I don't understand where that disconnect is.
Thank you. I see a comment from Emily Gray. Echo Valley has school choice. I think I saw a comment too that there are 25 students who go to Paine Mountain. Dan Morris, most Echo Valley students don't go to our schools. Dan, you've been patiently waiting for me to get through the board members.
Thanks, Chair Samuelson. And if this is not if me speaking at this point is not part of the process, I won't speak, but if I could, then.
Well, I think I would put you in the category of, just as people have been dropping comments in the chat to clarify the board's discussion, I wouldn't say this is a time for argument, like closing statement, but if there are facts that would clarify the board's position that we have not already.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the facts that I've been thinking of at listening to the board talk about this is, 16 VSA 719C went into effect in 2022. And so we're kind of talking about the timeline of the SU being formed. The statute that allows us to petition the board for a reconstitution of the SU board took place after the SU was made. Other things that took place after the SU was formed were the hiring of a superintendent, where many Paine Mountain taxpayers felt disenfranchised because their voice was so diluted, right? And then Act 127, reconfiguring how we spend money on special education. That was a moment when a lot of Paine Mountain community members felt very disenfranchised because their voice is so diluted at the SU board level. Those things took place after the communities agreed to form an SU and went with the default organization of a 3-3 board split. And after that, people start to realize that in a lot of ways that 3-3 board split unfairly dilutes Paine Mountain's voice and unfairly magnifies Echo Valley's. And the state also seems to have realized that that's not fair. And it's implicit in 16 VSA 719C that came into effect after the SUs were created, that we are allowed to ask for this kind of reconstitution.
Yes, and I do note with the comments that the board received, by my count, there were 9 comments that the board received that were supporting your request and well over 100 opposing it. So it is a little bit curious to me that there's not been more activity from Paine Mountain if people are feeling disfranchised that they have not submitted comments. Let me turn to Matthew, and then I think we're going to wrap it up.
Thank you. Yeah, Dan, you are right. It has, there have been, other legislation that's passed since then. But it's also, I think, worth noting, first of all, there are at least 11 districts by my count that are fully functioning with a 3-3 split just fine. And I can name those if you want to, but it's in the paperwork that I submitted. I think it's also important to note that since the change that what you referenced, Dan, in 2022 went into effect, nobody has done what Paine Mountain is doing. Everything seems to be working just fine. We ourselves are not dysfunctional. So the law, I think, went into effect to proactively attempt that, but there hasn't been any issues, right? Like statewide, there's no record of anybody having these difficulties. And so it's there as a protection mechanism, not there as a result of problems that have been cropping up. So thank you.
Thank you. So board members, unless anyone has anything else to add to the conversation, I would entertain a motion. Any motion. Lyle?
I would like to make a motion, but I think Mohammed may have a comment first.
Yes, I do. With all this discussion and with these great presentations from both Daniel and Matthew and the board colleagues and comments submitted to us, I think there are some factors to consider as well. With the redistricting coming up soon and the funds uncertainties for some programs that up to date are in limbo. We are not sure whether we're going to get them or not. Thinking of the funding that is in limbo, how would that funding affect both Paine Valley and the other school? We're not talking about this because we are not talking about the student population. And Understanding the student population is critical in this decision making. How many special education students do you have? How many ELL students do you have? How many students you will have that will potentially be affected by the new funding issue we are experiencing right now? To me, that counts a lot, and we do not have those figures yet with all this discussion. And here we are for students, but we are not talking about the students right now. And I'm not hearing anything about students. Although I appreciate all your comments. I just wanted to add that piece. We're here for the students, but I wanted to hear more about the students' demographic and how this change would possibly affect them. But we're not hearing it. It's missing a lot of information for me.
Thank you, Mohammed. Lyle?
Yeah, I was just trying to write down my motion here. Let me muddle through it. I would suggest that given the redistricting task force proposed timeline as outlined in Act 73, that we deny the request brought forward by Paine Mountain, with the understanding that Paine Mountain can return with a request or similar request or different request in the future, pending the outcome of the redistricting task force.
Okay. It's Lyle's motion. Is there a second?
I will second.
Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Maureen, could I ask you to do a roll call, please?
Yes. Mohammed Job, Mohammed, are you muted?
Yes,
Thank you.
denied.
A yay or nay?
Nay.
Okay. Cynthia Stewart,
Yay.
Brian Campion, I don't believe is here. Richard Werner,
Aye.
Tammy Colby,
Yes.
Caleb Greenwood,
Yes.
Tom Lovett,
Yes.
Joe Samuelson be voting.
Yes, in the affirmative.
6-1.
Thank you. So let me just close this topic off by, I think Lyle's comment, which was echoed by other board members about the redistricting task force, does give me pause about the board sort of stepping into waters where the borders are being shifted in real time, potentially. I'm also really concerned about taking a high functioning board and injecting something into it that might make it less high functioning. And I know this was an issue that was near and dear to both Daniel and Matthew, and all of the people who again reached out to the board in support of or opposition to Paine Mountain's request. It's clear to me that you guys care. And I know that this was not easy, maybe even to bring the petition before the board. It was certainly not an easy conversation for the board to have. And in denying the request, I think I can speak on behalf of the board by saying we're not insensitive to the request. But when we look at how things have happened thus far, I think board members have confidence in these prior actions that the SU has taken, and hopeful that the board will come together as it has in the past and continue to really focus on the SU as a whole. So I wish you all luck going forward, and I really do thank you for taking the time to meet with the board and to have a really heartfelt, cordial conversation with us. Mohammed?
Sounds like my vote was counted as nay, but I did say yes.
Okay, so you were in support of Lyle's motion?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Okay, let me just get my agenda. So I believe that takes us to the end of our meeting with our final opportunity for public to be heard. Dan, I see your hand is still raised. I see Rama's hand is raised.
Yeah, thanks. If I may, as a member of the public, comment on the vote that was just taken. The first thing that I'd like to say is thank you to the board for considering the request that Paine Mountain brought under 16 V.S.A. 719C. We appreciate it. And for the record, bringing the petition to the board was never intended to cause any kind of acrimony. It seems as though it wasn't taken that way, and that's regrettable. For the record, Paine Mountain fully intends to continue functioning the way that we do in relationship with Echo Valley, and we will, regardless of how board seats are allocated at the SU level. And the last comment that I'd like to make is a reiteration of what I said in the chat just now. No one from Paine Mountain has ever suggested that people from Echo Valley are somehow less than, not as competent. And I really do take offense to the suggestion that our petition implied anything like that. I'd like that to be reflected in the minutes that are being taken right now, that no one from Paine Mountain has ever said or contended anything like that. So thank you.
Thank you. I do remember reading a public comment, and it doesn't matter who it's by, but something about there was some criticism about how Echo Valley conducted its meetings. So I did see that. It was one comment. Certainly not the general consensus. Okay, Rama Schneider, and then Josh Dobrovich, and then
Yeah, hi, and thanks again for this final public comment. I just want to state that obviously, I mean, as you heard just in your discussion here involving how the current makeup of the CVSU membership came about, that public education is extremely complicated. And I know I'm kind of singing to the choir at this point. There's going to be a lot of changes coming down from the state. In my view, it's an unfortunate reaction to the complexities is to try to centralize decision-making as a way to get complexities out of the system and to streamline decision-making. I've always felt that the answer to a complex system is decentralized decision-making. But as you folks go forward, you're going to be dealing with a lot of artifacts of previous laws. And the side-by-side merger process that was used was an artifact of a combination of Act 156 from 2012 and Act 46 of 2015 that extended that, which required that both the districts end up in the same supervisory union in order to be in order to have the money benefits available to them, the merger benefits that came with that. So, you know, just keep that in mind, that as you go along, you're dealing with a lot of past decisions. They're not necessarily going to help you as you move forward. So I hope you folks will look for ways to detangle these sort of decision making. So, but thank you.
Thank you. Josh, then Matthew.
I just wanted to say thank you for the thoughtful decision and the time you put into making this decision. I do believe it is the right one now and in perpetuity for RSU and others. I do also appreciate most of all of the thought that you put into it during your discussion, because you put a lot of mine and other people's thoughts into words about this, you know. It doesn't feel like it's about the kids in the discussion. So I just want to say thank you very much for all of that. And I appreciate the service you do for our state.
Thank you. I had said Matthew, but I see Ken's hand is up first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I'm Ken Fredette from Wallingford. Little change of subject here. I am greatly concerned with recent actions by the Council of Independent Schools around Secretary of Education Saunders' recommendation on May 20th of this year, following a proper investigation, to revoke the approval of a therapeutic school to receive public dollars until such time as they come into compliance with Vermont statutes and rules governing independent schools. The council met on May 28th and voted 6-0-1 to support the Secretary's recommendation to revoke approval. But because that meeting wasn't properly warned, they met again on June 25th to confirm the vote. The day before that meeting, the school submitted a 75-page document to the council, effectively derailing the process. Ultimately, the council kicked the can on any further action until December 31st of this year. The council appears to wield great power with little to no oversight. They have stopped our Secretary of Education, the Agency of Education, and this board from taking action to protect some of our most vulnerable students, as well as ensuring tax dollars are being used properly. It seems the council answers to nobody, and documentation of their activities is woefully inadequate. It will require a change in statute to correct this. I know this board cannot comment on a specific matter that may come before you in a quasi-judicial hearing, but I also know it is incumbent upon you to inform legislation that impacts the ability to do your job, as is obviously the case with this process. I respectfully request you bring this problem to legislators' attention immediately. Thank you for your service. It's been quite an interesting meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew.
Hi again. Thanks for the opportunity to speak one more time. Dan, I am honestly terribly sorry that what I said has created a rift. Chair Samuelson, you are correct. There was a community member who wrote a letter that was particularly painful for myself to read, and it's not reflective of the true nature of the work that we do. Yes, there have been, strong discussions. There may have been, raised voices and things like that, but we consider that to be part of the democratic process, and we're completely fine with that. Second to that, Dan, in particular, I'd like you to maybe go back and review the video from June 16th at around, I guess, like 2 hours and 37 minutes or so, when you were responding to a question. And I believe that question was from Tammy. And you said something about values and things like that. And I just want you to take a careful look at that and see how, from a different point of view, how somebody might also have their feelings hurt a little bit by that way of saying, it's our board, it's our vision, and referring just to Paine Mountain and not really including us. We're not that different. We're not that different, I promise.
I just want to interrupt here because this is public comment to the board. And I think if you guys want to take this offline, that, I'll leave you to it. But we don't need to be privy to this conversation.
Okay. My apologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Zoe. Final word.
Thank you. If I may, I wanted to ask a question, also offer a consideration for the agenda item related to future planning, with the goal of making sure that in my role as secretary, I'm bringing forward all of the background information that the board needs to inform their decision making. Would that be okay? Yes. I know we've gone through that. Okay. So for the last several months, I've been providing a number of federal updates given the changes and uncertainty within that landscape. And I think it would be helpful if in a future meeting I could bring forward a presentation to provide an overview of the different federal programs, including the current requirements, what flexibility is allowed within those programs, and also the agency's role and responsibility for implementing and monitoring those programs. I think it would be quite helpful because there are a lot of complexities to this work, and having kind of that background knowledge around the current state is helpful as I'm sharing updates around some of the changes that are coming down from the federal government. And for the purpose of today, I just wanted to provide a couple clarifying points. Dr. Colby had asked a loaded question around particular flexibility. And I think the waiver request that was referenced was a path that a couple states are pursuing to dramatically expand flexibility with the specific goal of expanding school choice to private schools. So to answer that question, we are not pursuing such a waiver request. The flexibility I did mention was related to the Title IV-A program. So that is one of the programs that funding has been withheld. And so as we have been providing guidance to our districts, they are using any carryover grant funding they have to budget and utilizing those funds. That particular program has requirements around how those dollars have to be spent around proportionally to meet the specific program priorities. We have exercised our EdFlex authority, which is in our purview as a state agency to waive those requirements at this time so that schools and districts can utilize any remaining funds they have for this program in the best way they see fit. So we wanted to clarify that flexibility is something that we have been able to allow our districts to pursue. And then as we think big picture around our overall kind of requirements with the federal government, I think it would be helpful to share some updates around our state ESSA plan, which really guides our work. And we have pursued over the last year a number of amendments that have been approved by the federal government that have responded directly to findings from the federal monitoring visit. And we are in the process of continuing to pursue other updates that will be part of our new ESSA plan, 5-year plan that will be submitted in February. So just wanted to make sure that I clarified that, because when we talk about flexibility within the context of the federal programs, there's a tremendous amount of nuance there. I wanted to just make sure I was clarifying that very specific question and also making sure that I was helping to provide a broader understanding of what type of flexibility we've been able to allow our schools and districts to pursue given that some of these dollars have been frozen, and hope that in a future meeting it might be helpful to provide that. And the question of that is what level of information would be helpful and what timing, so that I can make sure we can prepare that for a future meeting to inform your work, and it also may inform future rulemaking considerations down the road.
I think that's a fantastic idea, Zoe, because I think it would be really helpful. I mean, I know Tammy has a lot of foundation in this area. I'll be honest, I don't. And so just speaking for myself, I think it would be really helpful. I mean, you sort of learn by osmosis the more you do this, but especially considering that we've got a new student member coming on, this might be a really good, getting everyone on the same page. I think it would be a really opportune time to have that conversation. So thank you.
So we can be prepared to do that. And just let me know what timing you would like. And Tammy, happy to coordinate with you. I know in your role, kind of an ed policy expert nationally, I know you have some specific questions for our state, and I'm happy to talk with you about that. But I think providing that broader framing is quite helpful given the updates we're providing.
Yep. I think that certainly having an update on the amendments will be really helpful and sort of your plans for amendments. And that was sort of why I was asking that question in the context of trying to think through Act 73 and how that impacts the rules, right? And that was, just to be clear, it wasn't that. I'm sorry if it was a loaded question, but that was sort of what was going on in the back of my mind, is that we had just had a conversation about the fact that we're going to have to do some pretty substantial rule updates. And if you are going to be applying for waivers or changing our ESSA plan, that could potentially have implications for things like how we start to think about graduation requirements and things along those lines. So, so I think it'd be really helpful to have an update. I know. I think it'd be really helpful to have a list of I think it'd be helpful for the board to see what the ESSA plan looks like. And I think it'd be helpful maybe just to have a timeline, maybe a easy table, right? Like, here's the ESSA plan, here are the key amendments that we've requested and their implications. And so just so everybody's on the same page about what our policy and practice obligations are.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I'm happy to do that. If next month is helpful, we could have that ready for next month, or if September would be better, just let me know when you would like us to provide that, and I'm happy to do so.
Why
I
don't we
think there's a lot, I think there's a lot on your plate, Zoe, especially with the independent schools reviews. And so if it's, you know, I don't need it by August, and also knowing that you probably have staff and yourself would like to say some vacation time this summer. So, you know, I don't
Hasn't
see
happened
unless
yet.
the sky, exactly, unless the sky is falling in other ways, I certainly
Yeah.
don't need it before September.
Okay. Okay. We'll
And
plan
what
on it then for September.
Yeah, what I was going to say is, you know, if we've got like a bunch of time in our August agenda, then that might be, and you know, you have time to put even like part one of it together. That might be helpful. But I think too that, you know, if you don't have time, because I realize that the agency, if it's looking at one thing, it's not looking at something else.
Right.
There might be fires that are burning brighter. But yeah, I think within a month or two would be helpful.
Okay.
I also will just put on the table, we may know more about the lawsuit with respect to the embargoed title funds, right? You know, and it would be great to be able to have that overview in the context of whenever that lawsuit comes in. I have not looked at the docket. I don't know when we might expect, but it may not be that. It might be not. If that might, we might have clear direction by August on that.
It was just filed on Monday.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, courts are a little backed up at the moment.
We're busy.
Anything else? All right. Well, if there's nothing further, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
May I just add one thing quickly?
Yes.
And this
Yes,
is
you
just a shout out. And I should have said earlier today, I'm not at my best today, is I just wanted to commend the agency's staff that represented the agency at the Education Conference of the States and the presentation that was done there on our learning programs. I know that was really well received. So I've heard lots of positive feedback, but I think it's just another example of how Vermont is really leading in this policy space and in the programmatic space. I know a lot of states were really looking to Vermont as in terms of sort of what we do here. And we had a terrific presentation by the agency staff in front of a very large group that was talking about sort of the good work that we're doing here in the state. So thank you, Zoe, for, I know that's funding out of your pocket to send somebody out there, but I know that a lot of states
Thank you
and
for that
practitioners
recognition.
around the
Yeah.
country really appreciated that.
Proud of the team.
Thank you, Tammy. All right, I heard a motion from Cynthia to adjourn. Is there a second?
I second it.
Seconded by Rich. Any further discussion? Final word. Hearing none, we stand in adjournment. Thank you all very much for a productive meeting. Stay cool.